If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
Our guest today on Horse Chats is Dr. Melany Cox, and if you think that name's a little bit familiar, just go back to some of our previous episodes, and particularly number 381 and number 494, and you'll find out where we chatted to Dr. Melany Cox. You'll find out a lot more about her. Melany is also an educator at Equitana, and she's going to be speaking on how to improve welfare problems for the competition horse, and I'm sure that's a highly relevant topic if you've got competition horses or not, because we all want to improve welfare for our horses, and even if you don't compete, I'm sure there'll be something in that to make it relevant for you. But before I do that, I'd just like to remind you that the sponsor for this episode is International Horse College, and if you'd like to work in the horse industry but not sure where to start, then have a chat to the friendly team at internationalhorsecollege.com. With the wide variety of horse courses from complete beginner to qualified professional, and with students in over 20 countries, International Horse College will be able to consider your individual requirements and guide you in the right direction, which could include RPL or recognition of prior learning. Simply go to internationalhorsecollege.com now and start the conversation. Registered Training Organisation 31352. Now, Mel, I know this topic, it's a big topic, it's a highly relevant topic, and we want to make it impactful. So let's have a little bit of a chat before Equitana. I think you're talking about this at Equitana. But before we even get into the chat, what makes you qualified to talk and comment on this? Because everyone's going to have an opinion. You know what the horse world is like. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone thinks that their opinion's right, even though in lots of cases there can be 10 different answers and they're all relevant. But for you to comment on this and teach people about this topic, what makes you qualified?
I think probably it's worth me going back to the beginning and saying who I am and where I came from to answer that question, because there's what makes me qualified is the mistakes I've made despite the training I've had. So, the universe thought it would be amusing to create this person who has sort of the genetic capabilities and the physical strength and then the environmental pressure to create someone with relentless ambition combined with terrible imposter syndrome, which made me always continue to pursue what if somebody knew more than me. And from the moment I popped out, I wanted to be the best horse rider and trainer that I could ever be. And in order to be the best horse rider and trainer that I could ever be, combined with trust issues, I thought, well, I better make sure I'm the best horse vet I can be. So from my earliest memories, pre-5-year-old, I wanted to be a top horse rider and trainer and a horse vet. And so my entire childhood and life was tailored towards that with a single-minded goal. And I was competing. I also happened to live near Olympic trainers. So my first trainer when I was 5 was Ruth Emery, who was taught by Franz Moringa, who was one of the riders of the Spanish Riding School. She's where I began, and she trained Australia's gold medal winning show jumping team. So that's where my riding began. And I was, by the time I was 7, I was jumping on that horse, jumping fences that were 4'6" high as a 7-year-old. And I competed in the state eventing championships as a 7-year-old. And then I went on and did state eventing, jumping and dressage championships right through to 21 very successfully. And I trained that little Connemara to Grand Prix level dressage by the time I was 17. I moved down to Victoria. She was in Queensland. Then I moved down to Victoria, and my neck just so happened to live near the next Olympic trainer, Warwick Cousins, who was trained by Podolsky. Warwick was Podolsky's only private pupil. And, Podolsky to this day is still considered to be the greatest master of riding that there ever was. He saved the Lipizzaner stallions in the war, and, he's considered the top of the top. So by luck, I happened to live near two people who were at the very top of the game. So from a riding perspective, I thought that I had been taught how to do it well. Then I went to uni, went into vet school because I wanted to be the best vet that I could be for my horses, very selfish reasons. Came out, deliberately found a job with the best lameness vet in the country, Dr. John Van Veenendaal, who was one of the best racetrack veterinarians. Went into it working as a racetrack veterinarian and, thought I was being trained well. And then I was going to be a surgeon, so I did an equine medicine membership. And one of my colleagues, Ian Bidstrup, actually said to me, Mel, you should go and do this chiropractic course, which RMIT was running, an animal chiro course. And so I said, chiropractic's rubbish. I've been, riding and training horses for 30 years, and I've seen every quack under the sun come out and say his hip's out of joint, his shoulder's out of joint, his sacroiliac's out of joint, his sciatic's out of joint. It's not even in a joint. So, that's what I was familiar with. So I said, all right then, because this is a measure of how stubborn I am. I paid $16,000 just to prove him wrong. And so I sat there in the course, chiropractic BS, and you lot won't persuade me that it's otherwise. And after sitting there for 2 years, probably being quite an annoying student, I had to eat humble pie and discover that I was wrong. So that was quite shocking. There were horses that I fixed who had unexplainable responses to treatment, and it wasn't coincidence, it wasn't time. And despite the fact that I had a medical background that trained us to believe chiropractic is rubbish, and we now know why that's happened, so I had to change my mind over that, which was a bit shocking. So then while I was at chiro school, one of my colleagues there rang me up and said, Melanie, there's this barefoot shoeing workshop. And at this point, I'd already been shoeing horses for several years because the next horse after that little white one was the one, I was hoping to go to the Olympics on, and she went lame 5 days after her first pair of shoes went on because my father was a mechanical engineer and he used to shoe our horses, and he could see with precision down to a micrometre, and so that's how I was trained to shoe. So I'd been shoeing her to keep her sound. So I said to that lady, barefoot's BS, but all right, I'll come and have a look, right? Because I can't stand somebody knowing more than me. It's a bit of a pathological problem I have. So I drove all the way up to Mildura, and it was a veterinarian who ran the workshop and sat there, probably was an annoying student again, for 2 days and said, it's all rubbish. I know if you take shoes off, the horses go footsore. You can't compete without shoes, right? Anyway, she said, the horse is footsore without shoes. It's got pathology. And I'm like, what? Anyway, came home, thought, do an experiment, take the shoes off. And that horse had subclinical lameness for 8 years, and I trained her to Grand Prix despite that because I was that good at shoeing her. I pulled the shoes off, and 2 weeks later, she was sound for the first time in 8 years. So that was shocking, right? I thought, damn, I'm highly educated, done all my homework, done all the study, and I was wrong twice. Well, then this little kid turns up because by then I started investigating the whole foot thing, and I think I also did an acupuncture degree at the same time there. So by then I'd collected 4 degrees. And so then this little young kid turns up, 19-year-old girl, was following me around because by then I was starting to teach barefoot trimming, and she wanted to learn about that. And she watched me ride one day, and my mare, as I say, she was doing Grand Prix training, but had a little spooking problem. And so this little kid says to me, she's spooking because you traumatised her. Right, well, I bred that horse. I broke that horse in, and she had the top training, and how dare you tell me that I traumatised her? So I was horrified, right? But I've kind of got a Clydesdale temperament, so, you wouldn't have seen that I was horrified. And I process things very much like Clydesdales do, very quiet and doughy. But that stuck in my craw for a long time. And I'd already been a little bit traumatised by being wrong twice, despite being highly educated. And so I thought, So I sat with that and I looked into all of her training, and I thought, I don't really like how your horses go. And then she said, there's some dude in Russia who says it's immoral and unethical to even ride horses. And I'm like, what? And she said, if you really care about horses, you wouldn't even ride them either. So I'd sit with that for years thinking, is it ethically right to even ride? And I thought, and in the end I decided if you could figure out how to train them nicely and kindly, then I think that is, because the reality is humans are drawn to horses, some of them, and they're never going to leave them. No matter what you do, people are going to hang around horses. So why don't we try and figure out how to make it as nice as possible for the horses? And that's kind of where it all began with me, aside from the whole barefoot thing being a massive issue for the industry. And then that same mare started to fall over in the horse float, so I was investigating how to stop horses scrambling in floats, and I bought this thing called a JR Easy Traveller, which is a straight load float with angled sides. And in it was this book called JC's 10 Commandments, right? And I thought, I don't need to read that. I know how to train horses. Anyway, but it's got pretty pictures in it, so I read the book, and I was reading going, gosh, I can't really argue with that. So I flew up to Queensland to see one of his clinics and thought, oh, that's pretty cool, nice ideas. And I'd already spent 6 months fixing horses, behavioural problems with his method, and it was pretty impressive. And so I said to him, when I met him, we were just chatting, and he said, what do you do? I said, I do a bit of dressage. And he said, oh, yeah, I haven't done much dressage, but I had a couple of lessons. And then he said, so I was having a lesson, and the lady said, why don't you try some piaffe on your horse? And he said, oh, what's that? Because he's a cowboy. And she said, well, that's when you put stop and go on the horse at the same time. And he goes, oh, so like this, huh? And he put stop and go on his horse, and the horse instantly did a beautiful piaffe. Right, so I heard that and went, what? I want me some of that. So then I investigated him, and then so I flew him down to Victoria, put on a clinic, hosted a clinic, and I gave him 10 of the most wild, dangerous monster horses you've ever seen. Buckers, bolters, rearers, biters, kickers, unrideable, unhandleable demons. And somebody came up to me at the end of the clinic and said, oh, that was a good clinic, Mel. Pity they were all really quiet horses. Anyway, so I thought this is too good to be true. So then I spent the next 15 years looking into everybody's training methods, because surely I hadn't stumbled across a genius. I'd already been raised by two of them, Ruth Emery and Warwick Cousins, but surely I hadn't stumbled across another legend. And yes, in fact, I have. So somewhere in there I did a saddle fitting course as well. And then throughout my veterinary career, I kind of got a reputation for fixing problem horses, either with, unsolvable lameness issues and unsolvable behavioural issues. And I've probably been paid for the last 40 years to train and break in horses that no one else can handle. So, there's a fair bit of experience from that point of view. But I guess the lesson is, despite my massive education that's been tailored completely towards riding and performance, I was wrong 3 times, wasn't I? So based on that and knowing what I know about how the industry goes, just because somebody might have some gold medals still doesn't mean they haven't got things to learn, and that is a very sobering thing to sit with. And so we will probably discuss some uncomfortable ideas today. And I guess what I'd like people to do is think about, why did you come to horses? Did you get drawn to horses because you love them? Do you love their spirit and their soul? And if so, is it not your duty to try and figure out, can you communicate with them in a way that's nicer? Can you train them in a way that's less distressing for them? Because all of their obnoxious behaviour, their violence, their chaos is all them just trying to understand what you're talking about and to stop feeling trapped. So the other advantage I've got is 30 years of being a lameness vet. I get to see everybody's naughty horses, and I say, oh, who broke this one in? Who trained that? So I've got to investigate everybody's training methods and find out which works. And, right now we're getting real concerns in the media about welfare for competition animals. So it's a very topical point, and I guess I'm trying to say that I've already been at this for my whole life. So I've figured out the answers for you. So rather than just criticise people and say, oh, I'm going to give you a yellow card for being too heavy on your horse, which is good. British Horse Society's just produced that 11 hours ago. That's come out that they're going to monitor their competitions better and yellow card people for being rough. It doesn't solve their problem. You need to give people the answer to the problem, because you can't ask people to change if you don't tell them how to fix it. Hopefully we'll be able to cover that a little bit today.
Yep.
And that's why I think I am uniquely qualified, because I can examine the horse from a pain point of view, I can examine the spine from a pain point of view, and I have 50 years of riding horses, 40 years of being paid to train them, and not train easy ones, train all the ones no one wants to touch. And so that gives me a very unique perspective on the whole problem.
I certainly agree. I think with that background, you've got a very, very unique background. If you talk to a lot of horse people, they will say, of course, I'm concerned about horse welfare. Of course, I want to improve the connection with my horse. Of course, I don't want my horse to be in pain. However, just because they want it doesn't mean that they have got it. You know, there's a lot of, we've got to work to, and I think you're the ideal person to teach that.
Yes, and it's still surprising. So, I've told the story of my mistakes despite my education, and because the lesson there is, and I have worked on the most expensive horses in this country, in racing, in dressage, jumping, I have touched the handle, the $1 million horses. And even today, I got told a story about a Grand Prix rider, trainer, who said, and I quote, "What do you want to do a saddle fit for? You don't need to do that." So, just because they're famous and just because they've got lots of ribbons and trophies and medals doesn't mean they still don't have things to learn. And so the people I find who are more inclined to investigate and find answers to their problems are those without the money and without the ability to go buy another horse. And so they're the ones who'll turn up to Equitana and listen to all the trainers and, because they're trying to solve their problem. And they're probably not the people who put the pressure on the horses to put spur holes in their sides and do the crueler things, because they don't have the strength, they don't have the courage, and they don't have the wherewithal to do it. It's the ones who can ride and compete. They don't turn up to things because they're happy with how they're doing it. They're winning their ribbons, and they think it's normal to have to work a horse for 4 hours before you go in the ring. That's not normal. When I was at vet school, one of the things they said to us that young veterinarians will struggle with is the biggest problem vets will suffer from is failure to recognise normal. Now, I can't remember which teacher said that, but when it was said to me, I thought, what? How on earth could you not recognise normal? That's really weird. But that stuck with me for years. Still, I see it every day in the industry. People don't recognise normal. People don't know what a normal hoof capsule is meant to look like. To this day, they still don't know what a normal foot looks like. They don't know what a normal back looks like. I saw one of the pictures of one of the eventing horses at the Olympics walking along before the vet check or whatever, and the horse has no top line. And if I met that as a client, I would say to that rider, that horse doesn't have enough muscle to be ridden. What are you riding it for? We need to fix its back. Well, the industry thinks it's normal. It's about to go out and perform at the Olympics. So even at the very elite level, you've got people who still don't realise there's many levels better. And horses are such amazing animals that they can win and do what we ask despite being profoundly compromised. So all of us need to strive and say, can I make it nicer for the horse? Can I make the horse healthier and happier? And can I communicate better? Just because they're good at it and they won ribbons doesn't mean they know.
Do you think it's more to do with competition horses, or is it more the competition horses, people more worried about their performance so they get them checked out more?
I think that everybody genuinely wants to do well. Nobody raises a kid and abuses it on purpose, do they? Everybody does the best they can with the knowledge that they have. So at no point do I blame anybody. I just think the more successful you get, the easier it is for you to think that you've ticked all the boxes. The easier it is for you to stop investigation. It's the people who aren't succeeding who are turning over every stone to try to better themselves because they already feel like they're not good enough. But the better you get at stuff, the easier it is to get complacent and think you've done your homework and that you've done your study and your research and your investigation, but you might still have more learning to do. And the industry thinks it's normal to have spur holes in their sides. When I was young, I never saw that, but I see it all the time now. The industry thinks it's normal to have cut lips in their pull on the bit so hard that they've got their lips cut. And they don't, I go into top barns and it's all sports. I'm not picking on one horse sport in particular. Every part of the industry needs to improve itself. They're all the same in my book. But, it's not normal to have cut lips and put gadgets on to force their head down and make them go. But they think it is. Do you see what I mean? So there's a big education deficit that we somehow need to overcome. And we somehow need to inspire people to say, oh, hang on a minute, that person just rode the daylights out of that horse for an hour before he went in the ring. Well, guess what? That's not normal. I can hop on my horse because particularly well, I mean, I'm very spoiled. I have Olympic training from people coming almost indirectly out of the Spanish riding school. So, I have a background nobody else has. So I've never had a problem with my horses. And add John Chatterton's training to that, and it's just literally I can hop on my horse and he's perfect there is no arguing with him. There's no arguing anymore. It's not normal to have to argue with them. But everybody thinks, it's normal for a horse to have a bad day and they be off their faces because it's windy or, But that's actually still a stressed horse. So we need to try and inspire people to say, oh, hang on a minute, it actually doesn't need to be this difficult. You don't even need a lot of money to make the communication easier and better for them. You don't need whips. The first horse I trained to Grand Prix, I never used a curb bit. Didn't want to. My teachers told me you don't need a curb bit. But I did use whip and spurs. And then the second horse I trained to Grand Prix, I never put spurs on her because that was my goal, right? Now my third horse still hasn't been broken to the saddle, but he's already training FEI level and he's bitless, bareback and shoeless. So, and for me that's fun because I want to get him to Grand Prix and never put a bit in his mouth. And it's totally, he comes up into his frame and he's amazing to ride and he's great fun to ride, so much fun, so responsive, so light. I don't use a whip, I don't use a bit, I don't need spurs. So, that's what I call more normal. We need to make that the goal. Get rid of the gadgets. Isn't that the art of training? No matter the sport, do it without gadgets.
Exactly. That's real invisible aids.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. You had said that it's not happening when you were younger, but why do you think these things are occurring now?
I mean, I think people coming out, there's less time, money. There's less kids growing up on farms just spending their lives with horses that have that innate natural horsemanship in them. And natural horsemanship means an ability to sit on the horse and not hang on to it. There's no safety in hanging on to it. If you rein a horse up and cling with your legs, you're going to stress that horse out. And kids who grew up, like I grew up on property, riding 10 horses a day, and I used to jump that little white horse over 5-foot-high fences in the dark, bareback, in a head collar, no helmet. I mean, crazy stuff. But who does that? But, that's what kids were like back then. So, that just gives you an ability to sit on a horse that using your own core balance without hanging off the mouth. And the other issue that's changed is, particularly in the warm bloods, they have been bred, they're springboks now. They can bounce. They just trot along being lazy and they're floating a foot off the ground. They'll canter along and they're still, 2 foot off the ground. If those things do a little spook or a leap, well, you're nearly 10 foot up in the air. So they're much more difficult horses to ride than what was around 30 years ago. And you've got parents buying kids young, $100,000 horses, put a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid on it. Well, that horse literally jumps the kid off, doesn't it? So because these horses have got so much more power, they're a lot harder to ride, so people start hanging on more. I mean, I think that's why you're seeing so much more rolka these days, because they actually have no way to control such a powerful animal. I think that's what's made it all worse. So the horses get hung on to more, they start rushing and boring through the bit. That's why you're seeing all the blue tongues. Or they just stop going because they've got the front door shut so tight with the heavy rein contact. Then they start digging with the spurs. And it all spirals downhill from there. If you go and watch, and it sounds like I'm picking on dressage at the moment, but I'm just saying it's in all industries, everybody's got problems, but dressage is a topical one for the minute. Go back and, watch the Spanish riding school. I shared a post the other day showing one of the performances in Vienna at the Spanish riding school. Every single stallion is in perfect self-carriage. The curb rein was never touched and the reins are loose. That's what collection was. Collection was self-carriage. We literally have almost no contact. You go back and look at Rainer Klimke's gold medal winning performance. His horse is in self-carriage. He has very little contact. You didn't see any of that at the Olympics now, do you? They're all hanging off the reins because the horses, tense and rushing and you start seeing these trots with the front legs going up, nearly hitting them in the chin, and the hind cannon bone's not parallel to the forearm. So they're hanging out, they're, hollow-backed, hindquarters not engaged. I mean, they might be scoring 80%, 85%, world record scores because they're so flamboyant in the front legs, but the back end's not there. The rule was hind cannon bone must always be parallel to the front forearm. That's not happening these days, is it? And you're certainly not seeing self-carriage, but they're very volatile horses.
So you had said education. Is that how the problems are going to be solved? Is it just education? Is it regulation? Tell us the way that you think we can solve these problems.
I think it begins with, number one, the beginning of the life for the young horse. If you wean that horse properly and don't give it emotional trauma from losing its mother in a way that makes it forever have separation anxiety. So, the poor old thoroughbreds, there's some people weaning at 3 and 4 months. Right? There's a book you could go out and read called The Science of Parenting by Margot Sunderland. She talks about how to create psychopathic humans. And it's all to do with nurturing, or the lack thereof, right? And you may not need the milk for your nutritional health beyond a certain level, but you need the bonding with the mother to actually grow the appropriate folds in your brain to become a balanced human. And they've done this with animal studies and human studies. And if premature children who lose their parents because somebody goes into hospital, children who have the death of a parent, if they look at them over life, they have more anxiety or more anger because they haven't had the nurturing bond. And they've proven this in animals too. So the same thing is, you take that animal, puppy, kitten, foal, away from its mother too young, then you're going to create someone who hasn't had the bonding time, therefore the brain and the social behavioural development and the self-regulation, the emotional regulation. You're taking away his ability to grow that. So you generate animals who are more anxious and more volatile. So it starts there. So don't wean them at 3 months. Don't even wean them at 6 months. Leave them on the mare as long as you can. And then when you do wean them, pop a yard in the paddock, put the mare in the yard, and the foal is outside the yard with an older, sensible uncle or aunt, and have the yard so the foal can poke his head through the rails and still drink from the mother whenever he wants. And you just leave the mare in the yard, and then the foal, when you see that foal's wandered off and gone off with the aunt or the uncle and stops coming back to the mare, that might take 2 or 3 weeks, then you can sneak the mare away. And the foal's like, what? Oh, didn't it? Who's my mum? Don't know who she is, don't care, right? So they don't even know they got weaned. And that's how you can do it without creating these monsters who have horrific separation anxiety, because that sets them all up to be rushing horses who then need riders to hang on their bits too much. So that's the first thing. Everybody needs to learn how to wean horses properly in a less traumatic manner. Because if you run all the foals into the barn and take the mares out the other door, and they're all like, oh my God, I lost my mum and I'm only 6 months old and I haven't had all my proper social development, I haven't even grown the brain to self-nurture and calm myself down. Well, you've set them up with a brain that's going to be easily destabilised in the first place. That's the first thing that needs fixing. The second thing that needs fixing is people need to start handling foals, learn, as I say, I've checked everybody's training method out. No one beats John Chatterton. Everyone needs to go read his book. You can go and buy it online, johnchatterton.com.au. I'm not being sponsored by him. Have a read and see what he says. But his foal handling methods, he can, and I've done it, he can catch and trim all 4 feet on a foal without a head collar. And not many people can do that, can they? Doesn't need a head collar to train the young foal to have his feet picked up. So all of that starts them off to be far more sensible and less stressed about humans, and the same thing going into their breakers. Most people don't know how to long rein a horse anymore. Well, how do you teach a horse to steer, stop, bend or go if you don't teach it long reining? You can't just jump on a horse and ride off. It doesn't work. The horse is like, what? What are legs? What is the reins? I see horses come out of Europe, $1 million horses, right? Imported from Europe, the best stables in Germany. Australian riders get on them, they won't go. Why? Well, Australian riders, some say that we don't have as strong a seats as the Europeans and we don't ride the same way. And so the horses tend to say, I don't care, I'm not going to listen to you, right? And so they get me in as the vet to investigate what's wrong with the horse. Is pain causing the problem? And oftentimes, not really. And sometimes I'll even hop on the horse because I'm trying to figure out, is it, subclinical lameness or not? And I hop on the horse and I go to steer or do anything, and the horse says, what? I don't even know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, hang on, hop off, touch the bit. Horse just locks its chin against the bit, Like, this horse has not been mouthed, doesn't know how to steer, stop, bend or go. I don't care if it's an FEI level dressage horse. I don't care if it's an X level jumping horse. Doesn't know what you're talking about. That's why you're having trouble. Need to break it in again. So that's what I'm saying. We need to fix our young horse training. And then you won't need so much pressure out in the ring. You know, teach them what steer, stop, bend and go means. You don't need your spurs. You don't need the whips. You don't need blue tongues. So we need to somehow inspire people to, when they see all of these things happening, say, hang on a minute, I heard a story about some bloke who can get piaffe with just saying stop and go at the same time and nothing more exciting than that. I heard a story about a bloke who can trim horses' feet with no head collar on. Meanwhile, I can't even catch my horse. So, you know, there's a lot to be done in informing people that there's nicer ways out there. And it starts at the top.
I'm listening to you speak and I just think, oh, you're one of the people I've got to highlight in my program and go and see with Equitana. You know, I'm really, really interested. I know you're teaching on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of an overview. You've got pain-free horse identifying and resolve problems. First of all, just give us an overview about Thursday.
Well, before I want to go and train a horse to behave itself, because this training is so amazing, you can teach them through anything and very quickly. All right, today I will get back to your question, but just as an aside, I was teaching a horse. I debucked a horse for a lady today because she bought this nice 16-year-old horse and he bucked her off, and he was meant to be a push-button horse that had nothing wrong there. And the issue is he's come to her, she's improved his hoof care, so he's feeling happier. He's feeling healthier. He's got a better mineral status, so he's, you know, feeling much healthier in himself. So he's a bit more exuberant. And so when she said canter, he said, "Woohoo, exciting!" Bucked her off. I said, "Well, we need to debuck him." So I debucked him today, and it only took 45 minutes. And at the end of the lesson, when she led him away, he kept turning around and looking because he wanted me. And then she put him in the paddock and walked up to the gate and waited for me to come and speak to him. And then for the next half an hour while I was looking at the next horse, he just followed me around, you know. So the training works so effectively, John Chatterton's method, that it can override pain. So I always want to rule out pain for behavioural problems first. And that horse had been checked for pain, and I said, right, now we've ruled out all your pain, let's go fix his mental pain. So the session on Thursday at Equitana is about teaching people how to look for the more subtle signs of pain. You know, what are the naughty behaviours, rearing, bolting, bucking, biting, spooking, are all actually symptoms of a horse who's potentially trying to tell you that he's in pain. So I just try and talk to people and show them simple checks that they can do themselves to see whether they need to go and get a professional in to sort out the pain.
Great. Now, Friday, you've got training difficult and young horses.
Friday, hopefully, you know, what's that saying in the movies? Don't work with kids and animals. The plan at the moment, if it works and the horses stay well, is I'm going to have a client bring in her young horse that we're breaking in, and I'm going to hop on him for the very first time at Equitana, right? Just to demonstrate how you can do it quietly and softly, and how well he can do it if we've done enough groundwork beforehand. So hopefully I can get John down and he'll do some preparation for 20 minutes while I bring in one of my horses, as long as they decide not to be sick or lame, and I'll do sort of the more ridden stage. So you're going to see both levels. You'll see the young one doing his baby steps, and then a more advanced horse showing how this groundwork is preparation for what I'm going to show you under saddle. So jam-packed, lots to show in 40 minutes, plus question time. But that's just to try and give people an idea of how soft and light you can make them. And I'll probably be too lazy to ride in a saddle at Equitana because, you know, I don't even ride in a saddle at home because I'm too lazy to put one on. So I just want to show you how easily it can be done without gadgets and softly and calm and quiet. And I won't be warming the horses up. We're going to walk into that off the float, stand around, straight into the ring, no practice. Because I want to show you how they can behave with no warm-up, no practice, no working the horse for 45 minutes before I walk in the ring. No, turn up cold and see what it does. Because I want to show people how good they can be cold.
Yeah. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you think would be beneficial to our listeners?
Well, I think we've talked about the problems.
Yes, definitely.
Have we talked about why they happen? Weaning, pain, better riders just tend to use gadgets and force. So, I mean, I think really the message to get across is obnoxious behaviour from horses rushing, laziness, spooking, bolting, bucking. It's all them trying to get away from feeling trapped. And they're being asked multiple things at once. If you want to, come into a jump in a collected frame, then you're saying go, but don't rush, don't race over the jump, right? If you want to do a dressage test, you're saying go that way, put a little bit of bend on, bounce up and down on the spot, very much multitasking. And if that horse doesn't fundamentally know the basics, which is go, stop, steer, bend, which they don't. Most competition horses don't. I've got a Grand Prix horse sitting in the paddock at the moment who doesn't know any of those things, despite the fact that he's successful. That's where you get the confusion. And as soon as they get confused, they start resisting, and then the riders start putting more pressure on. So all of that naughty behaviour, the resistance, it's not normal. It's just a confused horse who's just going, I don't know what you want. I'm just going to either lock up and forget it and ignore you, or I'm going to explode. And so, you end up with an OH&S problem of riders getting injured because the horses are actually just so stressed and confused because they're feeling trapped by the heavy rein contact, or trapped between the hands and the spurs, or the legs, it doesn't matter, or the spurs and legs and whip, And so they either shut down and turn into zombies, or they go bang. And so we've got people getting injured unnecessarily. You've got horses getting injured unnecessarily. And you've got people on social media saying, oh, that looks terrible, what are you doing, cruel? All because the foundation somehow, and this is the beauty of John. So I got trained by 2 trainers who came out of the Spanish riding school, and they were amazing. And my horses were really nice horses. Right? They're untalented horses, but they were trained. They were very nice horses to ride. Well, John Chatterton's added a layer in there. So I kind of think of it as everybody's training starts with small words, the cat sat on the mat. But they forgot to teach the horses the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, And I think that's where the amazing stuff about John's work is he comes in and teaches them the alphabet. You teach people to read with an alphabet, and then you teach them little words, and then you make the words bigger, and then 12 years later you do HSC. Well, we come in and teach horses 5-letter words, and then we say, right, off you go and do year 10 exams. Well, no wonder they're going to fight you. And as soon as they start fighting, you either get a better rider to discipline them and bully them, often with gadgets, or, you just bash them up until they go. And nobody wants to bash them up, but they just don't know that there's actually a way to do it that's way less traumatic for everybody concerned, and it's faster. Not that it's meant to be about speed, but it's way faster if you teach them the alphabet first, and if you don't have weaning trauma in them, and if you don't have other people when they're handling them, when they're doing their feet or their just general young life, pushing them around and trapping them when they're getting treated. It makes a big difference to the competition animal. So I think probably, what else can we do aside from better education is I think in the jumping, in the dressage, all of the sports, we need to start allocating points for softness. Are you on the bit without rein contact? Have you got true collection? We've lost the definition of true collection. Can you come into the jump and not punch the horse in the mouth with your hands and pull it up and smack it in the head? Give points for softness when they're competing. Bonus 5 points, bonus 10 points, whatever. Start scoring points for peaceful, beautiful, quiet riding. Maybe change some rules and allow some bitless riding in dressage, because that'll sort the weed out, won't it? More, if you can turn up with less fancy bits and less nose bands, more points for you. That would be inspirational, wouldn't it? If you can turn up no spurs, why do spurs have to be in competition? They don't. They're not needed. Why aren't hoof boots allowed in competition? All those horses with egg bar shoes and wedge pads and all, they're all lame in the feet. You know that, right? They're wearing those gadgets on their feet because they've got sore feet. Well, why don't we allow hoof boots in competition so they can at least perform without that level of pain? Then they won't need as much leg pressure because they'll bend more happily because they're not trying to avoid their 4 uncomfortable feet. There's just some radical ideas that you could easily change to make a difference in the quality of their life.
I love your radical ideas. I love all of your ideas. I think, certainly it's been, and I think we said right at the beginning, it was a big subject that you were talking about, and, what makes you qualified. You're certainly highly qualified. It's a relevant topic, and I think it's making a big impact on the community. But Mel, if people would like to contact you, we're going to put your contact details, as with your other chats, so people can go now and just have a look. Dr. Melany Quick, you can go to horsechats.com, do a search for Melany, do a search for Quick, and you'll find her chats. And I think a couple of them have been voted as listener's choice as well. So we get the highly rated chats and pull them out and say, right, this was a listener's choice. We sort of put it in again a couple of years later. And I think both your chats, Mel, have been voted as listener's choice.
Well, that's good. I mean, because there are practical things you can do without spending a ton of money to make things nicer for them. You don't need money. You just need an inquiring mind and be open to new ideas. And, it's game-changing. I would love everybody to have what I have. I go out, I laugh every day when I ride my horses. My horses sing me little songs when I dismount. I never have to worry about catching. They always come galloping. I walk out, they come galloping up to me. Even though they're going to work every single day, they come galloping up. When I go and do their I only ride them for about, 13 minutes, and they've done everything. It's all finished and done. And then I hop off, they nicker to me. Do you want that for your horse? Do you love horses, and do you want that? Do you want to be able to do everything you want with less gadgets and less spurs and no fight? I don't have fights with them at all anymore. You don't have to, because if you do their alphabet training and their small words training, they're just like, oh yeah, that's cool, really easy. And then when you take these traumatized horses and you teach them the alphabet, you should see the relief on the horse. They're like, oh my God, is that what you're talking about? That's really easy. I can cope with that. You're going to have less ulcers in them, less anxiety, because they're not fighting you anymore, because they're like, oh, that's really simple. Why didn't you explain that before? So, it is achievable. It's not something that's difficult. But the problem is that people think it's normal to have to ride a horse for an hour before you go in the ring. You don't have to. They're just missing a bit of training, missing some foundational work, missing the mother when they're babies so that they have a more agitated brain. It's all achievable stuff. And just giving people a yellow card, well, that's great, but you didn't tell them how to fix it. Well, what I'm saying is I have done all the investigation for the last 30 years. I have figured out how to fix this problem. Now we just need to try and inform as many people as possible to reach for it and inspire them to want it. And if they love their horses, I would hope that's all you need, that they'll want to chase it, because that's what drove me.
Yep. If people do contact you, what's the best way?
My website's theproblemhorse.com. Find me there. If you just put Melany Quick into Google, you'll find me easily enough. Probably phone call or text message. Emails seem to be a bit unreliable these days, but they can contact me that way. And otherwise, have a look at johnchatterton.com.au, because that man, for all of my training and skills, I am embarrassed to say that I didn't think of what he thought of. That man is a genius, and no one comes close to his ability at training horses. So I think if you've sought out their pain, yes, they all need saddle fitting. They love not wearing shoes, so if you can get away with that, do it. And use some John Chatterton, you will have yourself a horse that you would only ever dream of. And people will all say, oh, he's so lucky, such a nice horse. No, did your homework and made it easier for the horse, because horses hate fighting. They really don't like. They're very amenable, communicative, happy little animals. They hate trauma. They hate conflict. They really don't like it. They're such friendly animals. So if they're not that, then they're actually quite stressed.
All right, well, we'll catch up with you at Equitana then. And, I'll talk to you soon, Nell. I'm sure we'll have you back again very soon.
Thank you, Glenys. Anytime.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.